I still remember that night, the sound of rain tapping on the broken window, the flicker of the old lamp, and the echo of words that tore my heart apart. My daughter-in-law stood there, her arms crossed, her eyes cold as stone. She said, "We can't keep feeding an old woman who gives us nothing." My son didn't say a word. He just lowered his head, pretending not to hear. That silence, it was louder than any scream. I had spent my whole life working for that boy, sewing clothes till my fingers bled, skipping meals so he could eat, selling my gold jewelry when he lost his job. And now, after everything, I was just a burden to them. That night, I sat in the corner of my small room and looked at the framed picture of my husband. My eyes filled with tears, and I whispered, "I guess love doesn't last forever, does it?" But that wasn't the whole story. Because what happened the next morning changed everything. Hi everyone, this is Grandma Ruth, and today I want to tell you a story from my heart, a story about love, sacrifice, and the pain of being forgotten by the ones you gave everything to. If you're watching this right now, take a second to hit the subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're from. I'd love to know your story too. Maybe, just maybe, our hearts have walked down the same road. Years ago, life wasn't easy, but it was full of love. I lived in a small town in Kansas with my husband, John. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that was enough. When our son, Michael, was born, the world suddenly felt brighter. John used to say, "Ruth, this boy will grow up and give you the life you deserve." And I believed him. When John passed away after a heart attack, everything changed. I was only 40, with a teenage son and no savings. But I didn't give up. I took every sewing job I could find, hemming dresses, stitching curtains, fixing old coats for neighbors. My hands were always sore, but when Michael smiled, the pain disappeared. Then came the hardest year, the year Michael lost his job and his wife, Emily, got sick. I still remember her lying in bed, her face pale, the hospital bills piling up on the table. Michael cried that night, his voice breaking, "Mom, I don't know what to do." And that's when I made the decision that changed everything. I walked to the old wooden box at the bottom of my closet, the one with my wedding jewelry. My gold bangles, the earrings John had given me on our 10th anniversary, the necklace my mother gave me on my wedding day. Each piece held a memory, a piece of my life. But love, real love, is sacrifice. So, I sold them all. Every last piece. I still remember the look on Michael's face when I handed him the money. He hugged me so tight, crying, "Mom, you saved us." And in that moment, I felt proud. Proud that I could help my family, proud that my husband's memory lived on through my sacrifice. But as the years passed, things changed. Michael got a better job, bought a bigger house, and slowly, I became smaller in their world. They stopped asking me to sit at the dinner table. Emily would roll her eyes when I forgot things or moved too slowly. My room became the old storage space, one window, one chair, one bed. Sometimes, I would hear them laughing in the living room, and I'd smile quietly, pretending I was part of it. But deep down, I knew I had become invisible in my own home. One evening, I heard Emily whisper, "She's too much trouble now. We should send her somewhere." And Michael didn't argue. That silence, it cut deeper than any knife. I went to bed that night and couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the rain, remembering the sound of John's voice, remembering the warmth of those days when love meant something. And I thought, maybe this is what happens when you give too much. Maybe love, when not valued, turns into a burden. But that wasn't the end. because the next morning, something happened that none of them expected, and it changed everything. The morning after that painful night, I woke up before sunrise. The air felt heavy, like even the walls knew something was about to happen. I sat by the small window, my shawl wrapped around my shoulders, listening to the quiet hum of the house. Emily's voice drifted faintly from the hallway, sharp, annoyed, as she spoke to Michael. "You need to do it today," she said. "It's not fair to keep her here anymore." I froze. My own son's reply came softer, trembling. I'll talk to her later." They thought I couldn't hear. But a mother always hears. Every whisper, every sigh, every word that carries her child's fear or guilt, she hears it all. I sat there, staring at my wrinkled hands. Those same hands had held Michael when he was a baby, had wiped his tears, had made his favorite meals when he was sick. And now, those same hands had no place in his home. But before I could think any further, a loud knock echoed through the door. Sharp. Unexpected. Michael opened it, and standing there was a man in a grey coat holding a briefcase. "Good morning. I'm from the bank," he said, glancing around the house. "I need to speak with Mrs. Ruth Carter." Emily looked confused. "The bank? What for? Everything here is under our name." The man smiled politely. "Actually, ma'am, this property is still legally owned by Mrs. Ruth Carter." You could have heard a pin drop. Michael's face turned pale. Emily's mouth opened but no words came out. I stood up slowly from my chair, leaning on the wall for balance. "I'm Ruth," I said softly. "Please, come in." The man nodded and handed me a few documents. My hands shook as I unfolded them, but I knew exactly what they were. The papers John and I signed years ago when we bought this land. I had never transferred the ownership, even after Michael built the new house. It was still under my name. The bank officer continued, "We just needed confirmation, ma'am. The property taxes were paid last month under your name. We wanted to ensure the records were accurate." Emily's voice trembled with anger. "Wait, you mean she owns this house?" The man nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Legally, it belongs to her." I looked at Michael. His eyes met mine for the first time in weeks. They were filled with confusion, guilt, and something deeper, shame. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock. Then I said quietly, "It seems you'll have to decide carefully before sending me away." The man excused himself and left, leaving behind silence thick enough to choke on. Emily turned and stormed into the kitchen. Michael stayed frozen. His lips quivered as he whispered, "Mom, why didn't you tell us?" I gave him a small, tired smile. "Because it was never about ownership, son. It was about love. I thought love was enough to keep me here." He sat down beside me, his head in his hands. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't realize." Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. "No, you didn't," I said gently. "But now you do." The rest of that day was silent. Emily avoided me, slamming doors and muttering under her breath. Michael tried to act normal, but the tension in the air was impossible to ignore. I spent the afternoon in my small room, watching the sunlight fade across the walls. When evening came, Michael knocked softly on my door. He brought a cup of tea, something he hadn't done in years. "I made it the way you like," he said. His voice trembled, but his eyes looked softer now. I took the cup, my old fingers brushing against his. "Thank you, son." He sat down beside me. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "Mom, I never meant for things to go this far." Emily said things, and I just stayed quiet. I nodded slowly. Sometimes silence hurts more than words, Michael. He looked down, ashamed. "I'll fix this. I promise." I smiled faintly. Promises are easy, my dear. Keeping them is what counts. The night grew colder, but for the first time in months, my heart felt warm. There was still pain, yes, but there was also a small spark of something I hadn't felt in years, hope. But that wasn't the end. Because the very next day, something happened that no one in that house was ready for. The next morning, sunlight streamed softly through the thin curtains of my little room. I had barely slept. The house was strangely quiet, no sound of dishes clattering, no voices, no footsteps. Only silence, the kind that sits heavy in your chest. Then came another knock at the door. But this one, it wasn't harsh like yesterday's. It was soft, hesitant, almost nervous. Michael opened the door, and to everyone's surprise, it was our old neighbor, Mrs. Parker. Her hair had turned grey, but her smile was just as kind as I remembered. She stepped inside holding a small paper bag and said, "I heard what happened yesterday, Ruth. I just wanted to see you." Emily, clearly irritated, crossed her arms. "People talk too much in this neighborhood," she muttered. Mrs. Parker ignored her and walked straight toward me. She held my hands and whispered, "I still remember the day you sold your gold to help Michael's family. You never told anyone, but I was at the jewelry shop that day. You looked so proud, so strong. I've never forgotten it." Michael froze. He looked at me in disbelief. "Mom, you sold your gold?" I nodded slowly. "Yes. The hospital needed payment. Emily was sick, and you had lost your job. I didn't want you to worry." Emily's face went pale. Her eyes darted toward the floor, shame flickering across her face. Michael covered his mouth, tears welling up in his eyes. "You sold the last thing you had left, for us. And I called you a burden." I smiled weakly. "A mother never counts what she gives, son. She only counts her blessings. And for a long time, you were my biggest one." The room fell silent. The only sound was the clock ticking on the wall. Then, quietly, Michael knelt down beside my chair. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I forgot who I was, and who you are. You're the reason we survived." I brushed his hair gently, like I did when he was little. "You lost your way, Michael. But you can still find it again." For the first time, Emily stepped closer. Her voice trembled. I was wrong too. I was scared. Money, work, everything, it made me bitter. I forgot what love looks like. "I'm sorry, Mom." I looked into her eyes. For years, I had seen nothing but distance there. But now, I saw truth. Regret. Humanity. And so, I took her hand in mine and said softly, "We all forget sometimes. The important thing is, we remember before it's too late." Tears streamed down her face. She sunk to her knees beside Michael. "Please, don't leave us." I smiled faintly. "I wasn't planning to. I just needed you to see me again, not as a burden, but as the woman who once gave everything for this family." Michael stood up and hugged me tightly, his body shaking. "I promise, Mom, things will change. I'll take care of you now, the way you took care of us." I closed my eyes, resting my hand on his back. That's all I ever wanted, son. Not money, not gifts, just love. That night, for the first time in years, we all sat at the same dinner table. Emily cooked my favorite meal, chicken soup, the way I used to make it. We talked, we laughed, and for a few moments, it felt like the old days again. The pain hadn't vanished, but it had softened, replaced by something gentler, warmer. As the candles flickered on the table, I looked at Michael and Emily, at the home that was once filled with boldness, and I whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. Later that night, my little granddaughter, Lily, tiptoed into my room. She climbed onto my lap, her small hands touching my wrinkled face. "Grandma," she asked softly, "why did you sell your gold if it made you sad?" I smiled and kissed her forehead. "Because love, my sweet girl, is worth more than gold. And one day, when you grow up, you'll understand, the things we give up for others are never truly lost. They come back to us in other ways." She hugged me tightly, her little voice whispering, "I'll never forget you, Grandma." And as I held her close, my heart finally felt at peace. Sometimes, life takes everything from you, your youth, your strength, even your place in your own family. But if you keep love in your heart, it finds its way back, even if it takes years. Because love, real love, never forgets.